died during this period?
Accidents mostly, and in relationship to the war, I would say mostly by accidents.
In the UK, every November, Britain's war dead are remembered. The primary purpose of this day is to remember the dead men of World War I, the most awful of the world wars as regards the cheapness of men's lives. Men were ordered out of their trenches and made to walk slowly towards the enemy under machine gun fire and artillery bombardment. In one day, during one battle, Britain lost 58,000 men, as many men as America lost in the entire Vietnam War. Millions of men faced poison gas, landmines, and -20-degree temperatures on the battlefronts at Verdun and the Somme. Millions of men died or were horribly mutilated and crippled. Millions of men were willing volunteers, and millions more were conscripts, sent to fight and die in conditions so awful that they simply defy belief. Thousands of men lost their sanity or were shell-shocked into coma, and hundreds of men were executed for simply being unable to function as soldiers in a literal hell on earth. World War I was quite simply the worst war in imagining. It has the distinction of being quite probably the most awful experience human beings have ever suffered through, and although it is never ever highlighted, it was exclusively men that had to live through it and die through it. The cenotaph was unveiled in 1920 to commemorate the sacrifice of these men. It has nothing whatsoever to do with women, because they were not present on battlefields then, and they're frankly not present on battlefields now. In 2004, a memorial was unveiled to animals who served in World War II, and in 2005, a new war memorial was created.
And behind it, a new memorial this year, just a few hundred yards up from the cenotaph itself. It's a memorial to the women of World War II, the millions of women who supported the war effort, whether working as nurses, driving ambulances, working in munitions factories.
This memorial to women, of course, fails to acknowledge the efforts of men on the home front during the war. Men who were too old, too sick, or else injured from battle, or still recovering from the First World War. These men who were the driving force behind the industry and technology in Britain, supporting the men fighting in battle. From code breaking at Bletchley Park to tank shell production in Birmingham, men were still the main workhorses. Undoubtedly, women were fantastic on the home front during the war, but men were simply more so. In the light of men's contribution to the war effort, both at home and on the fronts, I don't know why these new statues exist. If we now have memorials to dogs, donkeys and women, what does a cenotaph mean? I think that what's happening is a deliberate attempt to belittle the enormous sacrifice of men in war. By unveiling statues for animals and women, and perhaps in future a statue to remember all of the windows that were broken during the war, male sacrifice is diluted, as if men, women and animals all sacrifice to the same degree. Well, with all due respect to women and animals, as much as you suffered and as much as you helped, it's men, and men alone, who deserve eternal recognition. A job in the army is a great career for a woman. There's next to no chance of ever being put in harm's way, yet they receive the same pay, benefits and career prospects as men. An army job even comes with free childcare and free breast implants.
I've always wanted breast implants, even when I was in the army. I tried to get them out of the army as well, and they won't give me them because they said that my boobs are fine.
Of course, the media would have it that women bear at least as much danger as men, if not more.
Come and get these patient visas, please! Shine a light in your eye. Go, go, go! 10 mil single dose.
What's a minor injury? A lot of times you hear on the news there's some minor injuries. What's a minor injury in a battle?
You have your triage,
Yeah.
and it depends on the severity. You know, if you've got someone that could be, he's got an injury, but if you tend to that wound, he could be another man back out. He could be another number out there fighting. He'll be catered to first than someone who's no uncertain terms of write-off. You know, if that person is more than likely going to die, or it's going to take out two men to try and get them sorted, whereas this bloke could be back on his feet. If he's tending to now, you're going to get this guy out there, you're going to sacrifice that one. The way it works. An injury would be a gunshot wound to the shoulder, something like that, maybe arm, so not major organs.
For the next 2 hours, Sam will be guarding the camp from inside a vulnerable sentry post. she's a prime target for snipers.
It's a sad fact that for all the talk of brave men and women, and the sacrifice of men and women, and the commitment of men and women in the armed forces, it's only the men that come back in body bags.
In the army, women are not put in the front line, but they expect to be paid the same. I mean, I think that's outrageous. Women in the military were allowed to do pretty much what they liked, and that no male officer dared to, in any way, exert his authority over them, and the reason we ought to admonish them for things that they might have done wrong because they were fearful of sexual harassment suits.
Women are a liability in the military for numerous reasons. Women cannot perform as well as men in battle. They're weaker, slower, smaller, and lack the temperament for the stress of battlefield action.
What's wrong? Come on, get up, let's go! Come on, we haven't got time for this!
They can't carry sufficient equipment, they lack the endurance of men, and they're plain inferior as soldiers. An average 13-year-old boy is more physically suited to soldiering than even an above-average woman. Women are allowed into the military without reaching even broadly similar standards as men. For example, they're allowed to do push-ups on their knees.
It's just the way it is, so they have to cater for that within the forces as well. Press-ups, they're not expected to do as many press-ups as us. And they have women press-ups where they don't keep their whole body off the ground. They put their knees on the ground and do press-ups that way. One in 5 guys that actually aspires to be a Marine will actually get into the basic to do it, to actually get on the course to do it. The guy that actually churns out the other end, for the Marines you'll probably have 1 out of 10 guys will actually make the 36 weeks that they do.
Women in the military increases the risk to male soldiers because men tend to protect the females, and their presence means that there are also fewer men to do the dangerous work.
In the military, where it's not just a question of even if you just said, well, let's choose the strongest and the most intelligent people to join, and women made the cut and could lift all the things up, and even under those circumstances, the presence of women in kind of frontline combat troops can be sort of disruptive or kind of upset the cohesiveness of the weird psychology that men get into when they're in life or death combat.
If you have a mixed group, men and women, in a combat situation, that there is going to be a tendency for that old protective role to come back in, and that the men will be more protective of the women.
I mean, just in kind of an intuitive sense, instead of all of a sudden it moves from being this team against that team to being all these individuals versus these other individuals for the intentions of this woman, or you find that the soldiers in this unit are suddenly taking more risks on behalf of, they're sort of being more chivalrous, for example, they're taking more risks on behalf of one of the members of their squad than they would do for others. It detracts from them being sort of an efficient fighting machine. I certainly don't think the argument is well, just men are just saying it. I don't think men necessarily want to kind of keep life-threatening violence to themselves. I mean,
women generally lack the ability to throw hand grenades far enough to avoid causing damage to their own forces. But instead of this precluding women from soldiering, the army built safety shields so that women could complete their training. The army did this for 2 reasons. 1, because of the enormous pressure to include women in the military, and 2, because it doesn't matter whether a woman can throw a grenade far enough or not. She'll never be in harm's way, so it's irrelevant if she can throw a grenade safely. A man who's smaller or weaker than average gets no quarter.
Is that a requirement a fixed standard? Doesn't matter how big you are, what size you are,
Doesn't
what
matter.
weight you are.
Doesn't matter how great you are, everything else. If you can't swim or if you can't do that physical test, then gone.
So would some of the physical tests be like carry a certain weight across a certain distance?
Yeah.
That weight is the same no matter who the person is?
Yeah, exactly. No matter who the person is.
I would say a guy would be better than a woman, say in the SAS, purely because of his physical advantages, his whole being, of a guy, his aggression, his testosterone, and his drive. And again, it would work the other way. I don't think guys would, be as good as a woman cleaning a house. No, I'm only joking. Well, no, I'm only joking.
women have numerous means at their disposal to prevent pregnancy, and so behaviour like this is equivalent to desertion and should be treated as such.